The Dead Space remake not only overhauled the graphical fidelity of the Dead Space universe, but it also came with a slew of story changes, including a new secret ending. Given what we will be discussing, I am now giving you a spoiler warning for both Dead Space and Dead Space 2. Thankfully, Motive have done all these changes very much in the spirit of the original, making any changes fascinating that fit within the lore. Of course, one of the biggest changes is the presence of a secret ending, unlockable only through New Game Plus, a great reward for the dedicated Dead Space player. While I love this addition and really enjoy it, what is more interesting to me is the discourse surrounding this secret ending, with various articles declaring that this secret ending is more compatible with Dead Space 2's story, and that it provides a better connection between the two stories. For example, the article from Polygon thinks it ties better because in the alternate ending, Isaac talks of building something, and in Dead Space 2 he is, in part, responsible for building a new marker on Titan Station. However, I don't think these statements that it's a better connective ending is quite right, and there is far more nuance here than the statements imply. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm really grateful for the inclusion of a secret ending. It adds a lot of replayability and a lot of fun, and something I really like about the secret ending is the fact that it doesn't just come out of nowhere, that you actually get some alternate dialogue in the last chapters of the game, a nice bit of signposting from Motive, which adds even more weight to this ending. But the idea that it fits better with Dead Space 2 skirts over Isaac as a character, and his uncanny resistance to the effects of the markers in the greater narrative. That is what makes him special, and one of the reasons he continues to be the main character in Dead Space 2 and 3. Not to mention that this opinion also wildly underestimates the lasting damaging effects the marker has on its victims, and as a result, the Isaac of the alternate ending simply wouldn't recover, in my opinion. I want to start by saying I'm not against this being the canon ending, I just don't think it aligns as well as you would think at first glance, and that some details would need to be changed in a Dead Space 2 remake, and Motive has already proven they can do this, tweak little details very tastefully. So I think the best place to start is to talk about the secret ending itself, and how the player achieves it. But before we go any further, if you enjoy Dead Space lore, then consider subscribing and liking the video. In order to witness this alternate ending, Isaac needs to collect 12 different marker fragments located around the Ishimura in New Game Plus. What these marker fragments are anyone's guess, but perhaps they are literal fragments of a marker, of this marker, reshaped into a marker model, or perhaps they are just idols of worship, as we do see Kyne displaying one on his desk during the recording of him and Captain Matthias that we find in Medical. Regardless of what they are, Isaac has to make an active effort to collect these fragments and then go back and deliver them to a shrine found in Captain Matthias' quarters. While we might consider this just a gamey item collection as a requirement for this new ending, surely if we are to consider the alternate ending canon, then we have to consider Isaac's actions in getting this ending canon too. This means that in the canon, if the alternate ending is canon, Isaac went around collecting marker fragments and completed a Unitology ritual. So my first point of contention with these types of arguments is that Isaac wouldn't do this in the first place. As we will discuss momentarily, Isaac is a person who very much hates Unitology for strong personal reasons, and as such, I doubt he would go to the effort to complete one of their rituals. So Isaac is to collect all 12 of these fragments from all corners of the Ishimura to make them whole. When they have been reunited and made whole, Isaac seems to connect to the marker in a way which claims to see him, and that in time he will know. This ritual is clearly the factor that changes Isaac so much, to the degree that we get the alternate ending and his alternate dialogue in the last chapter. In this alternate ending, Isaac is clearly not okay, is manic, fully brainwashed and a puppet to the marker's desires and plans. No longer someone who's just been manipulated by a fake Nicole, but is fully on board with the marker's plans. What I do really like about this ending is that it is signposted in the last chapter by a few bits of alternate dialogue that are different from a normal playthrough, and there are two instances that I can see. The first instance is with Nicole when we are guiding the marker through the storage areas, and she brings up the question of missing the Kellian crew. In the original, Isaac would say this.
Do you miss them, Isaac?
Kellian team? Yeah.
And your parents? Your mother was a unitologist. She believed.
She believed so much it killed her. Is this what she would have wanted?
And she did. Would that make this easier?
Maybe it's a good thing I'll never know.
So while Isaac is being manipulated and fooled by the marker in regards to Nicole, his beliefs, the core of his identity as a person, as Isaac, remain the same. He mourns the crew of the Kellian and the death of his mother, but says all that's happening around him is absolute madness. Again, reinforcing his ideals as someone who hates Unitology and hates what's happening here on Aegis 7 and the Ishimura. Compare this to the alternate dialogue we get in a New Game Plus alternate ending playthrough after Isaac's completed the ritual on the USG Ishimura.
Do you miss them, Isaac?
The Kellian team? Yeah.
They think they're dead. What do you think?
The marker saw who they really were. It'll remember them.
So this shows a pretty wild departure on Isaac's mindset, and shows that the alternate ending isn't just dumped in our laps, it is signposted. Isaac has had a complete character change, spouting the type of ideals surrounding the necromorphs that we'd expect Mercer to have. That the Kellian crew have achieved immortality through the marker. This just isn't Isaac, and it's clear that the manipulation of the marker has gone way further in this alternate ending, and thus we must assume a significant change has taken place in Isaac's psyche. He is a real pawn in the marker's plans now, being completely hollowed out by the markers. It is no longer Isaac. I think this is reinforced by the other piece of alternate dialogue that I picked up on, which is right at the onset of the hive mind fight. In the original, Isaac basically stands defiant, a man at the end of his tether, ready to throw down with nothing to lose. Again, this is the Isaac we know and love, defiant of the necromorphs and the marker, very reminiscent of his F you and F your marker declaration he makes at the end of Dead Space 2. And again, this is massively different from the dialogue he gives facing down the hive mind during the alternate ending path, where he says, This is a zealous man, a completely delusional person, fully dedicated to the marker's plan, reshaped neurologically, his personality completely changed, and bent to the marker's will. Prior to the ritual, on the same playthrough, players will still hear Isaac's hatred for Unitology in Chapter 4.
What's that? A recording? Huh. Must be the marker they dug up.
So it is the same. That marker. That's the symbol of the Church of Unitology.
Didn't take you for a believer, Isaac.
My mother was. But if they found this on some alien planet, what does that mean?
That Unitology's onto something?
Unitology's full of shit. Forget it.
However, after the ritual in Matthias' chambers, Isaac is completely changed, saying things he wouldn't say as normal Isaac, and at the end it is clear he is completely fried, wiped, and repurposed to the marker's will. And despite being shown Nicole's death moments earlier, he has forgotten apparently, and is talking to her as if she is really there. This Isaac is completely gone, completely wiped by his contact with the marker during the fragment ritual. And so some people think this leads better into Dead Space 2 because Isaac speaks of building something. And indeed in Dead Space 2, the big reveal is that Isaac has had a significant role in building the gold marker of Titan Station, thanks to the marker blueprints and code that has been imprinted in his brain. However, Dead Space 2 as it stands now was a story written to fit with the character and conclusion of the original Dead Space, which did not have this alternate endings. And while I believe both endings could definitely fit, I believe the alternate ending is just a fun Easter egg and doesn't actually provide a better connection. I think the original ending does that fine. So let us move on to my justification for believing that the alternate ending is not the canon ending as it stands now. Firstly, a pretty weak bit of evidence. The achievement or trophy refers to this as the alternate ending. Alternate endings usually don't mean the canon ending, it is the alternate fun ending. And to expand upon this idea of this path not being the canon one for Isaac, we could look at the fragments themselves. Each of the fragments have a unique description, usually some clever metaphor relating to the area in which you find them. However, the first fragment you pick up is the most interesting to me, as the description relates specifically to the beginning of Isaac's journey, which makes sense as it is the first he should pick up after arriving on the Ishimura. It reads, "Found on flight deck. One new starting point alters fate." I find this fascinating as it speaks of altering fate, and to me it is suggesting that by making Isaac collect these fragments, we are altering his fate, and this first one is the first step in altering his fate. We are changing the way his story is meant to play out, but perhaps I am looking too deeply into this. Secondly, and more importantly, Isaac in the alternate ending is far, far too gone to ever recover to the stage he is at in Dead Space 2. In Dead Space 2, Isaac is severely damaged, but he is still Isaac at his core. He has not changed personality-wise, and importantly, as I alluded to earlier, he isn't actually insane. The damage that Isaac suffers from is not really like madness. Rather, it is instead an external force, pressing against his mind and attacking him. The marker speaks to him, threatens him, and tries to break him, but it does not break him. Isaac is still Isaac, and he resists the marker at every turn. Sure, it gets the better of him sometimes, and it almost causes him great harm, and manipulates him into doing things that he wouldn't want to do, but he isn't under any illusions as to who he is as a person. He is still Isaac, an engineer who hates Unitology. I think people who claim that the alternate ending fits better are grossly underestimating the damage that the marker does to people. Isaac barely recovers from the damage he sustains in the normal ending, never mind the damage he would sustain in this alternate ending. Let's not forget that Kendra actually writes Isaac off, suggesting that he will never recover.
It's better this way, Isaac. You'll never recover from what the marker's done to you.
If the Isaac of classic Dead Space barely recovers, you can bet your bottom dollar that the alternate ending Isaac is gone, completely gone, a gibbering puppet for the marker and all its plans. His mind completely obliterated, and receiving damage that is non-recoverable. One only needs to see the results on Aegis 7 and the Ishimura to see the mind-altering effects that it has, and that very few people survive contact with the marker signal, never mind the necromorphs that it generates. The colony is completely overrun before the necromorphs even arrive. There is mass self-killing in Union Square, madness and murder. Take Harris for example, killing his nurse. People rarely survive this process with a semblance of any of their mind left intact. The Isaac of Dead Space 2 as it is now barely recovers from the contact that he had on the Ishimura, and if we were to go with the alternate ending, his contact is increased tenfold. How would we ever expect him to recover? In fact, in Dead Space 2, the lore of the dementia that the marker causes is revealed to affect genius level people like Isaac Clarke and Nolan Strauss less severely, although they are still very much damaged, but at least not to the degree of some of the non-recoverable people that we see upon the Ishimura that are completely gone, their minds fried by the power of the marker. It is intelligent people like this that the project on Titan Station requires, for it is their minds alone that the marker blueprints can be found in and harvested.
Bonnie Worthington, Research Log 16671. It's the same signal. Dementia and codes and blueprints are all caused by the same signal from the marker. It's the people that are different. Smart people see codes and blueprints, but to everyone else it's just noise. Noise that drives you mad.
Their high-functioning brains are able to make some sort of sense of the marker signal, turning it into code, whereas other people just hear noise and go insane. This is why Isaac, while clearly affected and attacked by the marker in his mind, is still able to make sense of his surroundings and who he is as a person. To add this alternate ending into the mix would really make this type of lore more complicated, as it would suggest he could be broken by the marker, making this idea of intelligent people being more resistant a little bit more contrary to the current lore. This brings us to my other main point. Isaac doesn't happily build Site-12, as is suggested by the alternate ending. This isn't actually how the project on Titan Station works. They don't gather up a mad Isaac and just set him to work. Those like Strauss and Isaac are drugged and kept catatonic for 3 years, and during this time they are interrogated and their minds are literally harvested for the code. This is where the infamous eye machine comes into play. The project team would then take these codes as a blueprint and reverse engineer new markers, with the golden Site-12 marker being the crowning achievement of this project. When the project collapses and Isaac finally awakes from his delirious drug-induced coma, he is still Isaac at the end of the day. The Isaac who hates Unitology, who hates the marker, but one who is under attack from having the marker codes forced upon him. His mind is being invaded, but he is still Isaac, just angrier and more fed up. To make this alternate ending canon, they would need to figure out a way in the lore for Isaac to recover from this heavily delusional state where he almost seems like his mind has been obliterated. Now, in Dead Space 1, when talking about Harris, it looks like Nicole Brennan tried to treat Harris, who clearly had been heavily affected by the marker's signal.
Personal log, Dr. Nicole Brennan. With medication and zero-G therapy, patient Harris is showing improvement. If this continues, there might be hope for the others on Aegis 7.
This was an extensive process, including zero-G therapy. I doubt Isaac would have got the same treatment in the project. The project is meant to use Isaac and people like Strauss as nothing more than tools to extract marker blueprints. They don't care about their treatment, they don't care about their recovery. They put them in and out of comas, take them out when they want to, and stick a needle into their eye to harvest the codes. So how would the alternate ending Isaac actually recover from this really far gone state? Look, I'm not saying it can't be done. Of course, Motive could tweak the lore and I'd be very happy with it, explaining in a good way how Isaac recovered, and how he just wakes up at the beginning of Dead Space 2 and is still the Isaac we know and love from the beginning of Dead Space 1. But some questions would definitely need to be answered going into a new Dead Space 2 remake if this does become the canon ending. Mainly, how did he recover from such damaging control when we know very few people who recover from the marker's influence? And this alternate ending only ramps up Isaac's exposure to the marker. And in general, the way they portray Isaac's captivity in Titan Station would need to change as well. Even in the introductory section of Dead Space 2, you see that he is almost catatonic when he is talking to the interrogator rather than someone that is gleefully building a new marker. And aside from that, on a personal level, I just prefer the original ending. I think it's the stronger one. Isaac is devastated, tired and broken. However, he has accepted Nicole's death. And again, this plays into what happens to Isaac in Dead Space 2. He is constantly haunted and hounded by Nicole. And in this one, there is no pretense, no manipulation. The marker is using her visage as psychological warfare against Isaac to finally break him. And again I ask, how would this make sense with the new alternate ending of Dead Space 1, where Isaac seems not to have accepted that Nicole is dead? This acceptance seems to be core to Isaac's identity as a character. But as I said, maybe it doesn't really matter. Both of them can fit in the end, and they can just explain it away that the effects have worn off. So those are my thoughts on the alternate ending in Dead Space Remake. What are your thoughts, guys? Do you think I'm completely wrong, or do you think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill and I'm looking too far into it? Please let me know your thoughts below on the remake and the story elements within it, and what you think is going to happen in Dead Space 2. But until next time, guys, I will see you on Titan Station. Take care and have a wonderful night.